Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's lecture with Adrienne Raffel. I'm Rebecca Roberts, the curator of programming for Planet Word. And I hope many of you had the chance to visit us when we were open last month. We did make the decision at the end of November that it was a better call for the safety of the community for us to close again temporarily. But that's given us the excuse to come bring you all of these virtual programs that I hope you've been enjoying. Go to our website, planetwordmuseum.org, to see what else we've got on tap for January coming up. We also do have one more program in December. The book editors of the Washington Post will join us on Monday to talk about how they chose the best books of the year for 2020. And you can also find out information about membership there. Membership is a really vital source of support for us. It's one of the reasons we're able to bring you programs like this and keep admission to the museum free, which it is and which we want it to always be. My guest, I'm delighted to tell you, is Adrienne Raffel. She is a writer and a poet and a teacher of writing, and she's on our advisory board at the museum. In fact, if you have visited and you've enjoyed the Poetry Nook or the Magical Library, she helps select the poems and books there. She is someone who has played around with words her whole life, so she's definitely one of our people. And her new book is called Thinking Inside the Box, and it's a history of crossword puzzles and people like you who love them. Adrienne, welcome, welcome. We're so happy to have you.
Oh, I'm so delighted to be here today. This museum, it's so special to be talking to you guys through Planet Word. I think it's such a fabulous institution. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for everything you did to help make it come to life. So I'm a crossword nerd. You're a crossword nerd. I am certain lots of the people on this webinar today are, religious completers of crosswords, and they seem so eternal, right? They feel like they've always been with us. So one of the things I was amazed to discover in your book is that they've barely been around for 100 years.
I know, just over 100 years. Let's see if this works. I'm gonna try to share my screen because I have a couple of cool images of like the sort of early history of the crossword puzzle that I'm gonna, so can you see this?
Yeah.
Great. So the crossword's birthday is coming up, you guys, on Monday, I guess. So December 21st, 1913. I know the crossword does seem like one of these things that's been around forever and ever. And I think word games, of course, have been around forever. The ancient Romans had, Sator square, little magic word squares. So word games have been around, but the crossword puzzle specifically, this editor at a newspaper called the New York World needed something to fill the Christmas pages, as you guys know. Trying to figure out how to fill your big Christmas puzzle issue is a scary thing. And he's like, well, what can I print that's going to literally fill space on the page? And a grid, I can do that now. So if you'll see here, it says I can make a grid and I can have it be empty, and then I'll have clues and people will fill in the answers to those clues. So this is actually the New York World from the Fun supplement. That's what the crossword appeared in. And so this is from December 21st, 1913. This is the close-up of what that first word cross puzzle looked like. And the word nerds out there will appreciate this. The word cross puzzle, some copies that are, a few weeks later, mismatched that and accidentally wrote it as crossword puzzle. So the crossword is a result of crossed words from the word cross. So this is what the original crossword looked like. As you'll notice, it's kind of tilted on its axis from what we think of as the crossword today. It looks like a diamond donut rather than a square, but the mechanism is pretty much the same. There also aren't those kind of blank squares in there, but Arthur Wynne, as editor of the New York World, the Fun supplement of the New York World, this is what the first crossword looks like. Some of the clues are a little bit weird. There's the word dove as an answer actually appears twice. You'd never see that today. Clue 10 to 18 is fiber of the Gomuti palm. What is a Gomuti palm? What readers of the New York World know what a Gomuti palm is? I don't know. The answer is doh, D-O-H, which luckily Homer Simpson has cleared up how to clue that word for us nowadays. But so this is what the first crossword puzzle looked like. It caught on. People were really into it. They thought it was really fun. But it really started to, it's caught on so much that I love this. This is a cartoon from the New York World a few, maybe like a decade later, but Ernie Bushmuller, this cartoonist who became much more famous after he made these, but he started off his career with a cartoon called Crossword Cal, where the crosswords becoming so popular that he has these adventures of Crossword Cal across the city. He turns his cab into a checkered cab by using old crosswords. 1924 though, so about a decade after the crossword was first introduced in the newspaper, 1924 is when the crossword really starts to take off, because what happened then is Simon and Schuster published the first crossword puzzle book. So we don't have to, have the newspaper. We can have and we don't have to like limit ourselves to one a day. We can have them all in a crossword puzzle book, this volume. Simon and Schuster thought that we're really afraid that it was going to be a bust. This was actually the first ever book that Dick Simon and Lincoln Schuster published together under their brand new publishing company. They were so afraid that they wouldn't sell that they made up a dummy imprint called Plaza Publishing. They were like, we don't want to put our names on this thing. Ends up being the biggest success. I mean, they sold like 123,000 copies the first year. They just they were printing money with this crossword puzzle book. Simon and Schuster's had crossword collections in print ever since. So I think that's a really fascinating tidbit for me, that Simon and the crossword puzzle really helped to launch and solidify the publishing industry. Now I guess we have to call it Simon and Schuster and Penguin and Random House, but that's another story. Right. So this is just as the crossword puzzle is becoming, I love these images so much, because I wanted to just show you, if Rebecca, we had time, just a couple of more cool.
Yeah, no, this is gorgeous and so weird.
It's so weird. In the 20s, the crossword puzzle totally took off and became the inspiration for fashion. This is haute couture lady. I really love her little jaunty hat here. And I don't know how you wear these cape wing crossword things. Good news is that the grids here, somebody knew what they were doing, because if you look really close, the grids kind of look fairly symmetrical. They look like semi-functional. I don't really know. This is an enamel bracelet. There's some crossword jewelry, crossword cufflinks. I think this bracelet is also from the 20s. This is maybe one of my favorite shots. This is a stage set from The Puzzles of 1925, which was a musical review all about crossword puzzles and people going insane from doing too many crossword puzzles. So this, maybe if your quarantine looks similar to my quarantine, maybe you feel this image resonate with you. But during the show, there was a song or something, or a dance scene, I don't really know, but for people who were so struck with the crossword fever that they had to go recover. And I don't know how recovering in this insane crossword sanatorium really works, or whether, I don't know the plot of the show, whether actually they were trying to make you do more and more crosswords. Whatever it is,
sadly, The Puzzles of 1925 did not enter the Broadway canon.
I know. So I also really love Broadway musicals, but yeah, I don't know if that's not really up there with Oklahoma, but maybe it should be. Maybe it's due. Maybe when we can go back to Broadway, it's due for a revival.
Right, you heard it here first.
You heard it here first. This is not a song from the Puzzles of 1925. Amazingly, crosswords inspired more music than a Broadway musical. This was this was a sort of popular song that was floating around in the 20s. This is the last thing I'll show you, just a little snippet of a song called Crossword Mama, You Puzzle Me, but Papa's Gonna Figure You Out.
You're like the crossword craze, crossword mama, you puzzle me, but Papa's gonna figure you out. You call me honey and ask me to see, looks like I'll be stung, no doubt. You go out calling for an hour or two, I don't know where or when or how or who. Crossword mama, you puzzle me, but Papa's gonna figure you out.
All right, I think that's enough of that.
Weird. I mean, I love that crosswords were this crazy fad, but also there was all this, pearl clutching that it was ruining America, that people were, neglecting serious work because they were doing crosswords. And now crosswords are, a signal of intelligence, that you're using your free time wisely instead of wasting it away on Netflix, right? I mean, what a difference 100 years makes.
Exactly. Yeah, there were all these at the time people were saying, oh my gosh, we're just corrupting our minds by doing these crosswords. The New York Times in the 20s wrote like really snooty op-eds about how they would, what is this thing that is taking over and people are doing this stupid game. It's truly what a difference 100 years makes.
And so how did the New York Times go from being sniffy about it to being sort of the standard bearer of crossword puzzles?
Yeah, so that happened because of World War II, actually. So in 1924, when crosswords really became viral, just to sort of walk back a little bit, then they also became really popular in England. And England was British newspapers and publications were like doing the same thing as the Times, being snooty about it. And then they did an about face very quickly when they realized that people were just getting hooked. British crosswords look a little different than American crosswords, which you can talk about a little later if you want to, sort of cryptic crosswords versus American. But I bring this up because we've got crosswords in sort of all the British newspapers, crosswords in all the American newspapers, basically except the New York Times. And the New York Times is a holdout. But right when Pearl Harbor was bombed, right around then, a few days later, an editor sends a letter to the publisher of the New York Times and says, we're going to have the worst headlines ever. We're just going to have the worst news ever for people for the next several years. We need something to give people some relief, to give people something that is in the paper every day, that is not just doom and gloom. What about a crossword puzzle? Turns out that the publisher of the New York Times really loved crossword puzzles. He was buying the rival newspaper just to do the crossword puzzle. So he was like, okay, fine, twist my arm. But the New York Times decided, all right, if we're going to have puzzles, they're going to be the gold standard of American crossword puzzles. So they hired Margaret Farrer, who was the editor behind she took over the puzzles at the New York World. She's the editor behind Simon and Schuster's crossword book. She's like the best crossword editor out there. They said, okay, we're going to hire you to make sure that the New York Times puzzle is the gold standard of crosswords. And what do we mean by that? They decided every grid was going to be symmetrical. They had rules about certain kinds of clues you could have, words had to cross each other, just really quality control. So that was how the New York Times got into the game, because of World War II.
And there was even a moment when there was a suspicion of espionage through crossword.
Yeah, so that's to hop across the pond again. So as I mentioned, crosswords became really popular in England, sort of on a pretty parallel timeline to the States. And during World War II, this is amazing. There was crosswords in, I think, the Observer, was it? Yeah. So which is a British newspaper, suddenly these weird words started appearing, like mulberry and Omaha and Neptune and Overlord and Juno. And these are words that you see like, okay, mulberry and Neptune, fine, just kind of interesting words. But the whole bunch of them together, suddenly British intelligence officials were like, wait, those are all code names for our, the beaches that we're going to be landing on. These are like military code names all appearing all at once in crossword puzzles. And they tracked it to one crossword setter, like crossword constructor. They tracked it back to one person essentially who was setting all these crosswords. So like, whoa, what's going on here? The setter's name is Leonard Daw. He's this headmaster at a boys' school just outside London. He makes like thousands of crosswords in his spare time, I guess. So they tracked it back to him. Intelligence officials like came knocking at his door, like, you're a traitor to your country. He's baffled. He has no idea what's going on. He's like, I'm like, hello, I'm a mild-mannered headmaster at a British boys' school, Turns out that the boys' school was right next door to a military camp. And what Leonard Daw did was, because he made so many of these crosswords, like he often let his students help him just kind of fill the grid in with cool words, right? It was actually, I mean, teachers use crosswords in the classroom all the time to this day. And this is maybe also like, one of the secret first stories of like the crossword as an educational thing too. So Leonard Daw has his students help him fill in the crossword. The students, they've been on their breaks. They go over to the military camp next door and they listen to soldiers talking, and they're picking up cool words like Overlord and like mulberry and Neptune and Juno. So they hear these cool words, they bring them back, they sort of put them in the crossword, not realizing they're doing anything wrong. Leonard Daw's submitting all these crosswords all the time. He's like, great, they're done. This is helpful to me. He sends them in. So it's this.
With no idea.
Yeah, no idea at all.
Well, this brings up the difference between American and British crosswords, which we have a question about it in the chat. We call British style crosswords here cryptic crosswords. They often have much more complex cluing. First of all, how did those differences come about, and what did Stephen Sondheim have to do with it?
Yes, Stephen Sondheim, get him in early. I love this. So first of all, cryptic crosswords versus, in Britain, they call American style crosswords quick crosswords. So we'll just call them cryptic versus quick, or British versus American. A cryptic crossword, there's the differences from an American style crossword. The main differences are these. Every clue has two layers to it. Every clue has a definition layer to it, like a literal layer, and an extra wordplay layer on top of it. So, for example, there'll be some kind of hint as the kind of wordplay that the clue wants you to do. If it says something like coffee reverse, then the word that they want you to think of, and then you have to do it backwards, or like something scrambled, and then oh, I'm supposed to give an anagram of one of these words here, right? So the clue itself, depending on how easy or hard it is, will give you, but it always, it can be sort of easier or harder, but it always is going to have some kind of wordplay element and then some kind of more definitional element built in. Whereas in America, like, we don't need to do that in the crosswords, or the American style crosswords don't need to do that. They can be just straight up definitions, or they can have some wordplay in them, but they're rarely as elaborate as a cryptic clue. And cryptic clues, they start with 2 layers of wordplay. They might have 18 layers of wordplay, and then they might be like the biggest layer cake of wordplay you've ever seen. What Stephen Sondheim has to do with it is that Sondheim really loves cryptic crosswords, and he brought them to America. Basically, it was kind of difficult to find cryptics in America unless you were going over to London, getting the London Times, bringing it back, which actually like several people did. Like the poet W.H. Auden really a fan of cryptic crosswords, not so much a fan of American ones. Sondheim, very similar, but Sondheim started writing cryptic style crosswords and publishing them in New York Magazine. They are bonkers. They are so hard. And I mean, if you're as much of a fan of Sondheim's musicals as I am, you know how incredibly dense his wordplay can be within the confines of a Broadway song, when he doesn't have to make it sort of legible to the ear on the first try, and when he has to spend like hours and hours staring at these things. Wow, they are great.
Well, this brings up, we've got a couple questions about this in the chat too. The process of constructing a crossword. And you actually did it. You tried to get a crossword puzzle published in the New York Times. You go through this in your book. It's sort of hilarious and wonderful. So how do you go about creating a crossword? What's the difference between the constructor and the editor? How does that whole process go?
Such good questions. And the process of trying to construct a crossword is it was one of the most humbling things I've ever done. It's really, really tricky and really, really fascinating. So just to answer the question about constructor versus editor, because this is something that I didn't even realize until diving into this, is that so the crossword editor, so for the New York Times, that's Will Shortz. And
also on the Planet Word Advisory Board.
Yes, yeah. So Will Shortz just probably is just an astounding, amazing person in the world of words out there. He does not write any of the New York Times crosswords. He does a heck of a lot of stuff, but he doesn't actually construct the crosswords. What he does with his team is that he edits the crossword. So basically, anybody in the world can mail a puzzle into the New York Times. And now you can email it in. That's very new. That's recent. But yeah, you send your puzzle to the New York Times, and Will and his team, what they'll do is they look at the puzzle and they edit it in terms of like, if there's something in the grid that looks a little funny, they might change that. They change a lot of the clues just for a huge variety of reasons, but they're not actually putting the letters into the grid. And even though they are editing the clues, they're not doing that first pass. They're not like Will's not making up the theme. The job of the editor is to make sure that the puzzle is an enjoyable solving experience, that it's a solving experience at a particular kind of difficulty level they want it to be. Enjoyable is really subjective. We can talk about that more later. The difficulty level, and also the editor's role, like any editors, they're thinking about diversity in all aspects. They're thinking about diversity of the types of things that clues refer to, types of cultural markers the clues are referring to. You don't want, you don't want your puzzle just referring to only things that people who were in a certain Yale classroom in 1956 all know, and you don't want your crossword referring to things that only people in this subset know. So there's lots of jobs that go into, or lots of things that go into the editorial role. The thing that the constructor does is, so the constructor is the one who says, okay, I have an idea for the theme of this crossword, the thing that I like want a bunch of the main answers to kind of circulate around, or I have an idea for cool words that I want to put in. They construct the entire crossword grid and they make their first pass at the clues, but putting the letters in the grid is really the thing that the constructor is going to do. And also, so the constructor, I would say 99.9% of constructors use construction software. So like you can find it, there's Crossfire is the one for Mac. I forget what the one for PC is called right now, but you can download this and it will help you put your letters into the grid and will help you make them symmetrical if that's the thing you want to do, which you probably do want to do. You can also upload long lists of words to the software so that the software can help you fill in the crossword puzzle. So that's
a little like cheating.
it is and isn't though. It's interesting. It's like, because if you click, you can make a crossword up in 5 seconds. You can say, all right, blank squares here, 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 autofill, done. But you can tell because the computer is not going to be as good as you are at. First of all, the computer's not going to make a theme up for you, right? And also, one thing that's really nice about the word list that's you know, not cheating is, first of all, you as the human have to like actually put the words into the word list, the computer, and or you know there's lots of these floating around. You have to download them, and it can really help you get away from like really gnarly corners, lots of abbreviations and stuff. It can suggest interesting stuff for you, or you can really play around with it. I think actually it seems like cheating at first, kind of intuitively, and then actually the word lists and developing word lists and playing with that just makes you able to be more creative and have a wider spread of different types of words going into more crossword puzzles.
So you don't necessarily need to rely on those crosswordese words. We have a question from someone who says, why do crosswords seem to have similar words that I mostly only know from crossword puzzles? I'm looking at you, Highlight and I am Pay, right? That are in there that it just feels like either the editor loves them or they're a really convenient arrangement of vowels and consonants, and they're just not words you use outside of crossword puzzles.
Exactly. So it's been a huge debate too in the crossword puzzle world. Like I think a few decades ago too, there were even more kind of crosswordese words. It became, and we were talking earlier about the crossword morphing from the like junk in the brain to like a sort of a lead marker of like, I'm super smart because I can do a crossword. And crosswordese is actually part of that, because a lot of people took point of pride as saying like, I know about the Isère River in France or something because of crosswords, or like the sort of it became a little code, like, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to recognize that I know my crosswordese. People really diehard crossword fans really like that. On the other hand, it sort of walled a bunch of people out. Crosswordese, these words like eerie, airy, area, I am like it's there are words that are short words with a lot of vowels in them. Typically, or a lot of like Oreo is a very like big example. There, and crossword constructors need them because all of the clues have to be checked, like all of the letters. You can't just have sort of a dangling letter not attached to anything else. So because of that, you need common letters that are going to help you connect words together. So there's a balance of, sometimes crosswordese is just the thing that is going to make the puzzle actually sit together and glue together. But and crossword, and the more you do crosswords, it is kind of fun sometimes to get those Easter eggs.
Yeah, like your own little secret language.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it doesn't want to be all secret language.
Right. Well, you mentioned Oreo, and that brings up this question of different frames of reference, right? I mean, we know it as a cookie, but it's also a derogatory term for someone who's considered black on the outside, white on the inside, right? And you mentioned that editors don't want clues to be too exclusive and too East Coast Ivy League-y. But it happens, right? We have a comment in the chat or in the Q&A that says, I've often cringed at clues that perpetuate racial, gender, et cetera, stereotypes and or use stigmatizing language, including at the MIT. Are there efforts to better train and sensitize crossword editors and constructors?
That's such a great question. I'm so glad to bring that up. And absolutely. And it's going on right now. And it's something that, and how it's going on is the New York Times is expanding its own editorial oversight of the crossword. They've hired more test readers from different backgrounds or test solvers rather, to be able to make sure that just as catches and backstops, like test solvers will solve for how well does this work as a game, and now they're really thinking about Okay, do we really want the word bimbo front and center at this crossword? That was one that came up a few years ago that the internet sort of raged about, rightfully so, I think, and it was not clued in a very sensitive way. Um, like I think there's questions you don't want to get to. You want to remember that these are combinations of letters in a game, but it's also like they connect to the real world, and the crossword is going to only get better and stronger when the clues are sensitive and thoughtful and referring to lots and lots of different cultures. So the New York Times has hired new people to help test solve and catch editorial bias. I think actually also the online communities have been really exciting for the crossword, in terms of there's just more crosswords that are out there and can develop. So there's things like Incubator, which only publishes crosswords by women, and there's projects like Queer Crosswords, which are like these cool crossword packs that they're fundraisers for LGBTQ charities. And so there's lots and lots of different ways for different crossword constructors to get their voices out there. And then I think because there's more independent crosswords, and there's also crossword critics online. Rex Parker, who runs a blog, there's several other blogs. So there's crossword critics online. There's a robust kind of Twitter life around crosswords. There's more crosswords in the world that then puts pressure in a good way on places. I mean, and there's more crosswords in outlets like the New Yorker. Now the Wall Street Journal's got a daily puzzle. Like there's just more crosswords, which then makes the New York Times have more pressure on it. If it's going to be the gold standard, it's got to be able to understand and not sort of slip behind and be able to represent.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that the question of how you clue something is really vital here, because there's the construction of the crossword and making all the words fit, and then the cluing is a whole other thing. And actually, I want to say that at the end of this hour, we are going to challenge you, the audience, to write some clues to a few of the most common crossword words. And the prize, if you are creative in that, is Adrienne's book, Thinking Inside the Box. So at the last 10 minutes of the hour, get your clues ready. We're going to challenge you to do a few. But I want to get into the world of competitive crosswords, because I had no idea this existed before I read your book. And you talked about how there was an explosion in crossword tournaments after the documentary Wordplay, which I then went back and watched, and a couple of people have recommended that in the chat as well.
Yeah.
Who knew? Competitive crosswords, that is a crazy, crazy scene.
Seems like an oxymoron, competitive, like what? Yeah, I mean, and I found out about it I remember seeing the documentary Wordplay. And a beautiful thing about the documentary Wordplay is that movie alone really helped spawn a new generation of crossword constructors and solvers. So if you go to these tournaments, these crossword puzzle tournaments, which do exist, you'll see a whole bunch of people there who are millennials and Gen Z, and a lot of them got their start through seeing this movie and like realizing like I didn't know there were such things. And a lot of them got their start that way, and now there's kind of a really nice growing community of that. So I think it's really cool that the crossword is continuing to thrive in even like really new ways because of this. But yeah, competitive crosswording is it's so impressive. I mean, the people who construct these crosswords, I bow down to them as geniuses, and the people who are crazy fast solvers, I bow down to them as geniuses. People can just whiz through these puzzles as though they're just, they can write the puzzles faster than I can try to scribble.
Right. Just write out a normal sentence. But, one of the things that struck me watching that doc is that, it's very clear that it progresses, just as the New York Times does throughout the week, of easier to harder puzzles.
Yeah.
And there does kind of seem like there's a consensus about what makes a puzzle easier or harder.
Yeah.
What is it?
So yeah, there's a few things. Well, one of them is the difficulty of the clues, which we were talking about earlier. So like one of my favorite examples is the word bacon, and I talk about this in the book too, where you can, if you think about the word bacon and you think about, okay, for an easy crossword, that might be, fried pig thing at breakfast, right? And then for a medium level crossword, like brings home the something for money, right? Or like brings home the bacon. And then for a difficult crossword, you have the clue strips in a club. And you're like, strips in a club? That sounds like that's making me think in one direction. That's making me think of, a one whole scene. Then you realize strips is not a verb, it's a noun. You realize club is a club sandwich. That's bacon in a club sandwich, right? So strips but that's an example. That's one example just to show how the type of clue can really push a crossword towards something that's much easier for you to solve or really difficult. Another thing that makes crosswords easier or difficult is even more baseline, does this crossword have a theme or not? So does it have a bunch of answers that constellate together around a specific idea? Themed crosswords can be super, super hard. Like they can be some of the trickiest ones at these crossword tournaments are themed, right? Because if the theme is something where you have like a rebus puzzle, like you have like 4 letters all crammed into one, and you're not told that you're supposed to do that, or you're supposed to like make the clues go backwards, and you have to figure that out. But themed puzzles are in general slightly easier, just because once you get the theme, then you know a few more of the answers. They're in general easier than a theme-less puzzle, which doesn't have any kind of like every clue for themselves, and often theme-less puzzles have really long clues in them, like they have clues that span the length of the grid. So like if it's a 15 by 15 grid, that have a lot of long clues in there, very open. So that themeless puzzles are generally among the most difficult American style crossword puzzles. So those are like the 2 main ways: the difficulty of cluing, and are you a themeless puzzle? And if you are, you're going to be trickier.
In the Q&A, Daryl Francis tells us, here in England, we even have clue writing competitions. Just write a winning clue for a given word. Here's one that won me a prize. Now, this is Daryl rightly showing off because this is so clever and torturous. The clue he wrote was urge to listen to Percy Faith's timeless composition. But in British cryptic crossword, there are some clues in there, right? A composition indicates it's going to be an anagram.
Right.
The answer is preachify, because the definition urge to listen to, preachify, but it's an anagram of Percy Faith minus the T, and timeless in the clue clued you in that you would take the T out of the anagram. Well done, Daryl. I think if American crosswords were clued that level of difficulty, I would be significantly less interested in doing them. I would just feel dumb all the time. And one of the great things about doing crosswords is when you can feel really smart,
But that was actually, Daryl, that is an incredible clue. And like, that's amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there.
But that was Sondheim's point when he wrote these crosswords for New York Magazine. He prefaced the first one he published, or the first couple he published, with this letter, just kind of essay about cryptic crosswords, saying if you, like you, Rebecca, if you want to feel smart while you're doing them, really the way to feel super smart is to do a cryptic, because then
right, the payoff for the effort is much bigger.
Yeah.
What do you look for in a good crossword? What makes a good crossword to you?
That's a great question. I and I'm someone who I wish I could do cryptics. I love them, and I think they're amazing and astounding. And I haven't put in the effort quite yet to do that. I'm just trying to work my way through regular crosswords. What I love in a crossword are a few things. I love to see kinds of themes that I would never think of as themes. So some of my favorite crosswords are what are called Schrodinger crosswords or quantum crosswords, where what the letter, it means like a letter can be filled in with two different options and it works. So
Right, like that famous Clinton
Clinton
Bob
Dole,
Dole one, right?
Clinton Bob Dole crossword, if you don't know it. It was the sort of revealer clue, or like the big theme clue was headline in tomorrow's paper, blank wins, something like that. So the answer was either Clinton or Bob Dole. Both are 7 letters, and all of the like there were these bunch of like corresponding downwords where you know, if it was Clinton and the downword was like blank 8, it was like it could either be cat or bat, and it worked for the whole thing, right? So it was this incredible crossword, this like magic trick. I love kind of that really, that excites me if it's a magic trick, but also but then like the rest, but then if the whole rest of the crossword really works seamlessly, if that means that you get a bunch of like sort of terrible knobs of like 18 abbreviations in one corner.
Right.
Yeah, that's not fun. That's just like a slog. But if the rest of the fill, and that's the other ones that really impress me, are ones that like don't seem to be super impressive. Maybe actually I like really like hard themeless puzzles that don't seem on the face of it to be super impressive. You're just like, oh, this is but then you realize sort of afterwards, like, wow, they worked that phrase into a crossword puzzle, and there weren't lots of like crossword puzzles that use a lot of interesting colloquial phrasing, but that don't kind of wear their cleverness on their sleeve. Those kind really impress me too.
And are you a physical pen and paper, or do you do them online?
So I really like doing them in physical pen and paper. I do them on my phone. I was grabbing. I do them on my phone mostly now.
Because we have a question in the Q&A saying that she finds doing it on a screen really different from doing it on paper.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
You know, I can see why you're a crossword person, right? You're a poet, you're a writer, you teach writing, you clearly find joy in words and wordplay in all kinds of formats. Did you find commonalities among crossword people when you went out among them?
Both yes and no beautifully. So I'll start with the no first, because one thing I love is that everybody has some kind of relationship with the crossword, no matter like where you're from, who you are, whether you totally hate them, whether you're just like, I never really do them, but there's something my grandma does, or my roommate in college was always doing them, or like I slowly came to them at some point. Everybody's got a relationship with the crossword that evolves over time in various ways. So that's one thing that I love, is that how much it just sort of cuts in, everybody thinks as them. One thing that I did find in the yes of commonalities that was, I guess, exciting to me, was that a lot of the people who are really at the sort of top echelon of constructors and solvers are math music kinds of people, like and makes sense when you think about like, okay, I'm gonna develop these elaborate like these word lists. A lot of the like sort of there's some like software sort of wonking out that can be done with construction and editing. So a lot of but I also really think that the kind of math music brain really gets turned on with crosswords, because they are a left-right thing. It's so much pattern recognition. It's almost more pattern recognition than a literature and language thing. And I mean, I know there's lots of people who are literature language people. There's someone who was a few years above me in my PhD program who constructs a lot of crossword puzzles. I found it out like sort of, he was extremely low key about it. And I discovered, oh wait, you do this thing. this is an English PhD program. But really the majority of the top constructors and solvers are much more from, like, you know, Dan Fayer, who's won several of the big tournaments, is a musician. There's lots of engineers, software people. So that, yeah, I found that really fascinating. It was actually fewer people from the sort of poetry, literature world, but all kind of coming together in a word space.
Well, I want, in the time we have left, to give this challenge. I'm going to share my screen of it. So Adrienne is the source of these. You can be angry with her when they're too hard. A couple of words that regularly appear in crosswords and some of the ways that they have been clued. And if you have an idea for a clue, put it in the chat, because Caitlin, who you've been chatting with in the chat, is keeping an eye on that. And let us know what you come up with. I'm going to call up the chat too, so that I can see some of your ideas. So here, this first one is zoo. So you can see where hippocampus is a pretty clever clue there. I also really like leopard spot. If you think you have a better clue for the word zoo, put it in the chat. A 1920s suit out of time. So the out of time cluing you to take the T off zoot. That's pretty clever. Menagerie without the M. Pandemonium. Lots of Zoom clues. Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys are clever. All right, next one. Ken. This is also the kind of word that has a few different definitions. So know what you want to clue it with. By the way, there is a prize, Adrienne's book. If anyone has a clever clue for Ken, which of course can be a first name. We had a couple questions actually while people are working on that. Barbie's boyfriend, Barbie's other, Barbie's beau, all right together. That was hilarious. Adrienne, we had a couple questions in the Q&A about proper names in crosswords. One person said that she was frustrated with it because if you don't know, you don't know. You know, you can't kind of guess. And whether that's like, do people have strong feelings about proper names?
Hugely strong feelings. And it was one of the things that, you know, when Will Shortz took over the Times crossword in '93, he started sort of allowing proper names and more cultural references directly into the crossword that hadn't been allowed before. And I think that, or like the editors hadn't put in before, they would force a word like Ken to be clued as something like comprehension or understanding, and never Ken Watanabe or Ken Jennings or something. Will Shortz's view is that like he wanted just like more options for cluing, make it more democratic and like have lots more. I think having proper names in the crossword is fun, but I also think that it then gives the editor this other role of making sure that you know, if you don't know a proper name, you should be able to, you can always get it, because like if it's a down name, then you can get all the across answers, right? So the editor's role is to make sure that for something that's maybe a name that fewer people will know, that the crossings will be clear enough so that you don't get just sort of totally stumped and you're like, oh, well, womp womp, I don't know that, so I'll never get that
It's
corner.
that big blank hole in the upper northwest corner of my puzzle.
Exactly. Yeah, so that can be, that's a place where you really see editorial skill shine through.
I put up ERA, and a lot of people are cluing it to the ERA amendment, which is very clever. I also very much enjoyed for Ken, David Garlock came up with when doubled on an alternative to your current activity, because of Ken puzzles. I liked that one. Daryl Francis, he of the Preachify clue for ERA came up with are back in Eon. I know, very clever. All right, let's try tie. We have a couple more of these. We had Queen of the Olympian Gods loses her head for Hera. Hera, clever.
Oh, I like it.
Tie, this is another one, necktie, tie game. What sort of blank die, dad gift. Topped with a bow.
Nice.
You guys are clever.
Yeah, these are great.
Shoelace activity.
Nice.
All right, we are starting to run out of time, so I want to get through the rest of these. Star, I'm going to give you a couple of 4-letter ones. Kissing your sister. Guide or load for star. I like those kinds of clues where it seems like words that have nothing to do with each other, but the clued word actually ties them together.
Yeah, I feel like now this is my like nerdy point. I feel like wasn't there a section of the SATs or some sort of test where like
Right.
I love that. I love that. I was like, yes. Bring me there. Rats go backwards.
You guys are really clever. Backward city hazard. Yeah. Rats go backwards, Michael. All right, let's see what else we got here. Hollywood paver, I like that one. Idle. Again, are you not doing anything? Is it a car idling? Is it Eric Idle? Ooh, a Houston Astro diss from one of our guests in the chat. Star, a symbol on a cheating baseball player's cap. Yeah, we Nats fans, we remember.
I love the deep cuts. You could just sort of make these. You think the clues are really, you don't get any tone of voice in them, but
Oh, no.
oh, you do.
But it's one of the things that makes crosswords sort of communal, right? I mean, we talked about the secret code of crosswordese, but if your local paper is dissing the Houston Astros, you know who you're talking to. Billy's teacher misspelled his last again. Wow, that's a Billy Idol reference. Oh, done.
Yeah.
I love that we're getting like Greek mythology and Billy Idol all in the same chat.
That's what I love about crosswords. You can't help it. You're always going to get Greek mythology and Billy Idol. So good.
Okay, I think there's one more. Teen. I'm going to scroll back up because I'm a little out of. Tamed airport. Oh, Idlewild. Idlewild without the wild. Idle. Tamed airport. Very clever.
Age of angst. That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take back the hair remover. Neat backwards. Clever.
Nice. Yeah.
An ump with, yeah, there are a couple of clues in here about ump. An ump without children, ump follower, ump ending. Frequent eye roller. Maybe you live in my house. All right, you guys are incredibly clever. I don't know, Adrienne, you want to pick one winner?
Oh,
I know, it's really hard.
I couldn't pick a winner. Oh God.
I know, they're really great.
They're so good. Gosh.
I am partial to Tamed Airport. That one feels very clever to me.
I can't pick a winner. This is like trying to like choose among your children. You're all winners. So
Oh, David Garlock, he of the Preachify, says he would give it to the Tamed Airport. All right, Roland. Roland, you are our winner.
Yeah.
And Caitlin in the chat is going to direct message you for your address so that Adrian's publisher can send you a copy of the book. But for all of the rest of you who are so fantastic, I recommend the book. I really, really do. Let me stop sharing so that I can see your faces again, or you can see mine at least.
And the winner was, the clue was Tamed Airport
For the
for
word idle. Idlewild without the wild, which is kind of amazing. All right. So thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Adrian, for playing along with all that and sharing all your deep knowledge and enthusiasm for the topic and everything you've done for Planet Word.
Thank you so much. This has been such a joy. And I am so excited to, when it's safe to come see Planet Word in person.
Yes. And we will, if you don't subscribe to our newsletter or follow us on social media, that is where we're going to announce first what our reopening plans are. So I encourage you to do that. We do, as I say, have one more program in December on Monday with the book editors of the Washington Post, and then a bunch more in January. We've got Naomi Nye and James Cruz talking about reading and writing poetry. We've got another trivia night. We've got one of my very favorite audiobook narrators talking about what that job is like. So please check out our possible programs coming up. And thank you all. If you're members of Planet Word, thank you so much for that support. It's hugely important to us. And have a safe and wonderful holiday, everyone. Thank you so much for being here.